Okay, welcome back for another edition of the Elite Agent Podcast. I am happy to be here today with Whitney Aldrich.
Hello.
All right. Thanks, Whitney, for coming out and joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit because it took me 3 takes to get that introduction right. That's just the nature of doing stuff live like this. Well, kind of live. We thankfully got Jake to help us edit things out. But I'm glad to have you here, Whitney. You've got a little bit of a different story than other people that we've talked to in the past. And yet your story is probably much more common and relatable than the people that we've talked to in the past, you know? And so tell me a little bit about how you got into real estate. What's your background? What caused you to decide to get into real estate, and how has that evolved?
Okay. Well, I am a pharmacist. I have been for about 12 years, and we moved back from North Carolina to Utah in 2016. We bought a house, and we were there for a few years, and we decided to move. And before we put that house up for sale, I decided to get my license so that I could do that and then purchase our new home as me being the agent. So I went to school. It was an online school, got my license, and that was kind of the beginning of that journey. I put the house up for sale. It went great, and the plan was to just do it for friends and family. It was just strictly going to be a part-time type thing, but it really took off. I really enjoyed it, and it's just kind of been amazing ever since.
Now, it is surprising to me how many people get into this not planning on it being a career. You know, they're trying to save money. Maybe they're investors in other jobs, and they just think, you know what, I'm going to take on this aspect of it. Or they're buying their first home, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to get my real estate license because I can save a little bit of commission. And to be fair, 85% of those agents drop out in the first year. I mean, it is not easy to make it. And yet you not only beat the odds, you've taken it to the point where being a pharmacist, which is a very respected career,
Right, yeah.
now is on the back burner. You're full-time real estate.
Yep.
And you can go in and do pharmacy whenever you want. You don't have a set schedule, right?
That's right. Yep.
So how has that evolved? Because you said you got into it to buy your own house. And obviously you're doing something right. Not only did you beat the odds, you're in the top 15% of agents that simply by surviving. But how many years has it been now for you?
Oh, let's see. That was 2019. So
going on 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Not too long.
Yeah. But in that 4 years, you've made some major progression.
Yes. I would say, the biggest thing would just be my sphere of influence, referrals, and Facebook. Believe it or not, I do a lot of contacting and I guess just prospecting through Facebook. I do a lot of that.
People that you know?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you interact with people that you don't know that
I do. Yeah,
liking some posts?
Yep. There's a whole bunch of groups that I'm a part of, and I try to reach out to people who are looking for advice or just have questions about Utah in general.
Okay.
And I try to be helpful in any way that I can. And then I just kind of put in there that I'm also a real estate agent if you're looking for anything, and I get a lot of leads that way.
Do you? Is that hard? Is that scary a little bit, putting yourself out there?
It was at the beginning when I first started, but I'm just so used to it now that it's just kind of like second nature.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that because for me, I built my business before they had computers or typewriters. Still, just kidding. It's not. 20 years. We had computers, but we didn't have all the social stuff that we have today. And so for me, the hard part was getting on the phone. But after a while of doing it, just get on it and do it.
Yeah.
You know, so everything's probably a little bit scary when you start.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got on, and social media you're a lot younger than me. So you've got the social media stuff. You've got a little bit of background there. Went outside of your comfort zone, got involved in some groups. You interact a lot there. And then you've got a sphere of influence that you've provided great levels of service to.
Yep.
And they continue to come back and refer you to other people.
That's right.
Do you do anything specific with your sphere of influence to build that up? Do you have methods that you use to stay in contact with them?
I do send out mailers every like quarter. I think they go out every quarter just
Okay.
to stay top of mind.
Okay.
And then I always call on the anniversary, the home anniversary for
Okay.
every transaction that I've closed
Oh, good.
every year. And I
Cool.
talk to them. And then around different holidays, I like to go and stop by to everyone and just kind of check in and see how everyone's doing.
That's cool. So
So,
you've maintained those relationships over
yes.
time.
Hmm.
Now tell me a little bit about how you balance it all. Because not only did you say you started out as a pharmacist, which can be a very demanding job,
Hmm.
right? But you're also a mom, which
Yeah.
is always a demanding job. So tell me a little bit about that. How do you, and actually, you've mentioned to me just in talking that not only does the balancing aspect of it work for you, but that's one of the reasons that you love real estate.
Right. Yeah. I like the flexibility of it. And I think I've been fortunate that a lot of my clients have been accepting of the kids. Um, Maybe not on the first time that I meet them, but definitely after I build a relationship with them, I can take the kids on showings.
Hmm.
So it's been flexible that way. And the kids have actually grown to really like going. My
Okay.
daughter, she's almost 9. She loves real estate, and I think she's kind of taken a side to it. She likes to go to the showings. She's always talking about the rooms, the property. She's kind of enjoyed that part of it. So I really like that.
Does she have plans to work with her mom when she gets older?
She's talking about it.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
I have tried to, much to the chagrin of my ex, um, tried to convince some of my kids, like, hey, come do this with me. Think of all the money you can save by not going to college.
Oh,
Yeah, ex doesn't love that advice, but you know what? The idea of working with my kids is fun.
yeah,
So, did you have to train your kids when you go through homes? Like, I remember taking my kids through a couple of times. I'm like, those aren't your toys. You can't play
yeah.
with them.
Yeah, it's been a learning curve, especially over the years. As they were younger, it was, put your hand in my pocket and follow me. But as I've gotten a little older, they're better and they just stay with me, go through the rooms. Sometimes the older one will stay in the car. It just kind of depends on the situation, where we are, the type of property. If it's a nicer home, like in the upper echelon, maybe I'll be
Hmm.
a little bit more careful. But it just kind of depends. But they're pretty good.
Isn't it neat, though, that this is a career that is so real
Yeah,
that you don't have to put on a fake veneer?
yeah,
I mean, like you said, the first time you meet your clients, they don't know you, you don't know them, you talk with them. But once you get to know people, people are people.
right,
And, and in the end, in this business, they're families that are looking for a place for their families. And they tend to have a lot of understanding
right.
for you with your family.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, your kids need to be trained to be with you.
Yeah.
They can't be running around jumping on the
Respectful, right.
furniture. Yeah, they got to be respectful. They got to do all that stuff. But if you've trained your kids a little bit, I love that this profession allows you to be a professional and yet take your kids along with you.
Yeah,
And people are cool with that because I don't know. This is the personal nature of this business. It's like buying a home is such a personal thing that they don't need you to be stuffy. And I love that about your story. That's what I started with, is because so many agents have other jobs, and granted, yours is very flexible.
yes.
Like you can dedicate all the time that you need to your clients. You can pick and choose when you go in to the pharmacy.
That's right.
Um, so your clients get all the attention that they need. But you have this flexibility between a job and kids and all this other stuff. And like I was saying, probably 70-80% of agents are in that boat. And almost every new agent that I talk to asks the question, is it okay if I'm not full-time? Because most can't start out that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you start out in this business, and even if you got a client on day one, you don't get a paycheck till day 90 or 120 or
Right.
whatever, because you've got to take that. You've either got a listing that you've got to get up on the market. Once you get it under contract, you're 30 days out from close. You have a buyer that wants to go shopping. It could be a couple of months of shopping, get it under contract. Maybe that contract works. Maybe it falls through. There's so many different things. But it's hard for an adult with a family and responsibilities, bills to pay, to come in cold turkey without another job and say, I can go 4 or 5 months without a paycheck.
Right.
And so most people come in like you, and they've got all of these other demands, and yet most of them don't survive. 85% fall through. What is one piece of advice that that you could share that you feel like made a difference for you?
I think just really showing your clients that you are committed and dedicated to them. Communication is key. I mean, I think that showing all of your cards and being available when your clients need you is also a good thing. I know that there's been a lot of times when I get a call from a client that say that they can't get a hold of another agent, and so I get the call. So I think being available is a good aspect, but just being reliable, I think, is probably the biggest aspect.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Return your phone calls,
Yeah.
and your odds go way up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you started out in real estate, were you full-time in pharmacy?
Yes.
Okay.
When
40 hours a week? More than that?
About 32 hours a
Okay.
week in the pharmacy.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, yeah, how did you do that transition then from a full-time job? Because now, when you start out with a full-time job, it's different than, part-time. You've maybe got 6 or 7 hours a day that you could, not play around with, but you have something to build with.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing full-time another job, it's hard. You've only got a couple hours a day, especially when you got kids, and there's all of those expectations and a spouse and things like that. How do you transition from a full-time job to this? Is it just as you got a couple of closings, you got more confident?
I think it differs a little bit with pharmacy because I was able to tell my job that I didn't want to be scheduled full-time, that I
Okay.
wanted to be scheduled part-time. And when you do that, I can choose the shifts that I want to work. So the transition there actually was very easy because even though I was technically part-time, I could still pick up as many hours as I needed.
Okay.
So if my client load was low, I could still pick up maybe, let's say, full-time hours.
That's kind of an ideal scenario for
Yes.
somebody then.
Yes, it was actually very ideal.
Yeah.
So let's say my client load was low for 2-3 months, I could still pick up as many hours as I needed
Mm-hmm.
to pick up that slack.
And then as you close more in real estate,
Then I just cut back my part-time hours.
and
But now I'm working, let's say, just a handful of times a month maybe.
okay.
Unless my client or workload is low, then I can pick up more hours if I need it.
Have you been pleasantly surprised about the potential that you have in this business?
Yes.
Like, would you
Potential's endless.
have ever dreamed you'd be where you are now?
No. Mm-mm.
Kind of cool, huh?
Yeah. Very cool. I never would have dreamed that I would be here.
Yeah. And you do a great job.
Thank you.
I just want
I
to
try.
commend you.
I try hard.
Yeah.
But I'm not perfect, and I'm always reaching out for help to you, and you're always there, which is nice.
Well, I try to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I like that I'm always learning, and every transaction is different. So that's one of the things that I love about real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think it's kind of the perfect job for me. I've always described myself, and I've never been diagnosed, so this is a self-diagnosis, a little bit ADD. You know, when I was in school, the teacher had to move me to the back of the room because I couldn't sit down. I would literally stand next to my desk, and if I was on the very back row, I was less disruptive to the class. And so I just couldn't sit down. And even nowadays, I've got little tics, like I'm always tapping. I was at a board of realtors lunch. This was a couple of years ago, but I've never forgiven this person. And she said, I just can't sit with you. I can't sit at your table because you're always bouncing your knee and it drives me nuts. And I'm like, I have no control over that. I have to be moving. I have to be doing something. And I love the nature of this business because I don't have to go into an office and sit in a cubicle every day. I've had those jobs, you know? And I can be working at a computer, or I can get up and move around. I can schedule appointments. I can be doing lots of different things. I love the variety that it gives me. Is that something that you?
Yep,
Yeah.
I do. Yep, I love.
Is it that kind of variety, or you just like the variety of the different challenges that every deal presents?
I think it's more of every transaction is different.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what gets me, because every time I have something new, whether it's the buying side or the selling side or the property itself, there's something going on with the property. Every time there's something new.
The longer I'm in this business, the more it shocks me that people are still out there trying to be a for sale by owner or self-representing themselves as a buyer. I'm like, don't you realize how many different ways this could go wrong
Right.
for you?
Yeah.
And because, you've been doing this for 4 years. You're a consistent closer, consistently closing deals, and yet every transaction you're like, wow, this is something I didn't know before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the odds of having somebody have a successful transaction on their own without an agent seems so slim to me. And I think the only reason that they do go through is because quite often they're like, if they're selling their home, they're selling it for way less than they probably could have. And so somebody has a bad inspection. They're like, hey, don't tell anybody. We don't want to rock the boat. We're getting this house $50,000 below asking price. Sellers don't know. So, whatever. I often think that the reason people that are unrepresented can actually have a successful transaction is because of how much they don't know they're missing out on.
Yeah.
And when you've got an agent that's pushing it to the limits, that's saying, let's get you top dollar, or if you're representing a buyer, let's get you the best price or the best home or whatever. When we're actually negotiating hard, when you're pushing the limits like that, that's when you learn things. That's when things become a challenge.
Yeah.
And that challenge, it is kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the last one I had, I found some pretty significant. It was a contract that was a builder's contract, and the client that I was representing was told something by the builder's representative, and as we were going through the contract, it said the opposite. So it was actually pretty significant, and the buyer that I was representing decided to not buy the home. So I think, let's say they weren't represented by an agent, they would have gotten to the closing table and been very, very disappointed or upset. And then
it's interesting you mentioned that. I just saw an email come through this morning from the Salt Lake Board of Realtors, and their attorney regularly posts some legal advice. It's his little corner for, here's the latest legal thing that he's facing. And he was sharing one where it was $150,000 earnest money.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, big deal. $150,000 earnest money. And the buyer had said something and the seller had said something back. And verbally, they had progressed based on what had been said, but it wasn't reflected that way in the contract. And one of I can't remember the details of the story, but the moral of the story in the end was, if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. And so somebody was losing $150,000 of earnest money.
Oh my gosh.
Because they took something of what somebody had said, which isn't provable.
Right.
You go to court and they're like, well, he said this. No, this is what we have in writing.
Yeah.
And they didn't have it in writing. And so those details, I'm glad you caught that.
I know. And my client is very thankful.
And the crazy thing is that cost you a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, that transaction ended, which means you don't get a commission.
And that's okay with me,
Yeah.
because the client's happy and he was thankful. So
Yeah.
I still have that client, and he will probably be my client forever because of my due diligence for him and reading that contract thoroughly. So.
And I love that you put your fiduciary duty to your clients first.
Right.
It's the way it should be.
Yeah.
So great. Let me ask one last question of you before I part with you today.
Okay.
As I'm talking to new agents, I always I like them to be able to see these podcasts and stuff. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a brand new agent starting out in this business that you think would help them the most?
That you need to have sufficient training, that you need to find a brokerage that is going to invest time into you, and that you need to make sure that that you realize that the training that you do to get your license and the training, real world training, is very different.
Very different.
So find a brokerage that really cares about you, that you can, find a good home, and that will train you for the real world.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate that because I'm actually kind of passionate about training. You know that?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to convey that message so much to people
Yeah.
is you've got to invest in yourself. This is a very serious business, caring for people, for their home, where they've raised their family, or where they're going to be raising their family. It's not something we can take for granted. And like you said, we're constantly faced with new scenarios and new challenges and new problems. And if somebody isn't investing in themselves, how are they solving those problems? What value are they providing? So thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Any last thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it, Whitney.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. We hope you found the discussion valuable. Remember, if you're looking to take your own real estate career to the next level, be sure to visit eliteagenttraining.com for our exclusive training program. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new agent or a veteran in the industry. If you're looking to increase your business, this program will get you there. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more valuable insights and tips. Until next time.